Can you picture being guided through immersive virtual worlds by your personal AI cat companion? It's not just a fantasy, it's the heartwarming reality of neurotech. Stay with us to uncover the incredible story of how this perfectly innovative creation is not just an AI cat, but a uCat, a lifeline for those who long to break free from their physical limitations and embrace a world of endless possibilities. Hello, our amazing listeners of Neurocareers doing the impossible. It's your podcast host, Dr. Milena Korostenskaya, or simply Dr. K. And I'm excited to welcome you to the second season of our podcast, exploring entrepreneurial careers in neuroscience and neurotechnologies. Have you ever wondered what it takes to transform brain science into groundbreaking products and services? Are you curious about the fearless visionaries who bridge the gap between neuroscience and entrepreneurship to change people's life and reshape our world? Are you ready to explore how to navigate the uncharted waters of neurotech entrepreneurship? In season two, we're diving deep into the world of entrepreneurial ventures in neuroscience and neurotechnologies. If you are looking to create an immediate impact and translate your neuroscience and neurotech ideas into innovative services that truly make a difference in the world, this season is tailor made for you. Join us and learn from the best in the field about succeeding in the entrepreneurial journey in neuroscience and neurotechnology where innovation meets impact. We've got an incredible lineup of guests who are not only shaped their careers but have also made a profound impact on the field. Throughout this season, we'll explore the captivating stories of visionaries who've risen to the challenge, who've turned obstacles into opportunities, and who've innovated in ways that are changing the landscape of neurocareers. So, whether you are a seasoned professional in the field, an inspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the intersection of science and business in this ever evolving arena, the season promises inspiration, education, and a glimpse into the exciting future of neurocareers. I am Dr. Milena Korostenskaya, the founder of the Institute of Neuroapproaches, where I help people establish successful careers in neuroscience and neurotechnologies through career coaching and education. So let's dive into the entrepreneurial journeys that are shaping the future of neuroscience and neurotechnologies together. Tune in now into the thrilling episode number 64. Dear Neurocareers podcast listeners, welcome to another exciting episode of our Entrepreneurial Journeys podcast series. Are you curious about how cutting edge technology can shape the future and create opportunities for meaningful change? Today, we're thrilled to introduce you to Sam Hosovsky, the visionary CEO at uCat, VR-BCI in London, UK. Sam is on a remarkable mission at the forefront of pioneering a revolutionary product that combines brain-computer interfaces and virtual reality technology. uCat VR-BCI is not just a product, it's a groundbreaking leap forward in the world of neurotech. This innovative solution offers a natural way for individuals to connect with technology, serving as an AI mentor for brain implant users and providing freedom of expression for those with paralysis. Imagine a world where technology becomes an extension of ourselves, breaking barriers and transforming lives. Sam's work is precisely that, an embodiment of the future. Grounded in scientific advancements and a deep commitment to inclusion, uCat VR-BCI is poised to reshape how we interact with technology. Join us in this episode as we dive into Sam's entrepreneurial journey, the challenges he's faced, and the profound impact of his work. Get ready to be inspired and informed about the incredible potential of neurotech to make the impossible possible. Welcome, Sam. It's a great pleasure to have you today on our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. And can you briefly introduce yourself and also let our listeners know where you are joining us from?
Absolutely, Milena. Thank you very much for the kind introduction and having a conversation with me today. I'm joining you from London. Um, this is a quirky studio we have in North London. And one funny fact about it is that we are actually right next door to a big music studios as well. So if you hear in the background jazz music or drums, this would be the reason. I think music always helps. So to introduce myself, there is not too much glamour here. I think maybe something that stands out from your previous members that you have interviewed on the podcast is that I'm not a researcher, I'm not a scientist. I come from a career of really commercializing emerging technologies for life science. And my latest sites have been focused on brain computer interfaces. It's been now a journey of about 7 years to get us to a point where only last year we incorporated uCat as finally something we believe that is going to make sense, both commercially, societally, and technologically. And I think it's important to also kind of start from the basics, right? We are, as you mentioned, a virtual reality company as much as we are a brain computer interface company. So we kind of sit at this intersection between virtual reality, brain computer interfaces, and artificial intelligence. And the one kind of key takeaway about why our product makes sense and what we do is that there's this belief in the company. The belief is that as long as your motor cortex is intact and functional, you can use data that we can retrieve from this motor cortex of yours to fully embody a virtual avatar and to express your language, your speech, your movements through it in virtual spaces and interact with your loved ones or return to work. That's kind of our credo. That's what our whole company is based on.
Thank you very much for your introduction. It's great to hear that you are joining us from England. I've studied during my master's years in Manchester. And I made myself a present for my birthday to go to London. And I stayed there for 3 days exploring the city. So it is a very memorable birthday. So thank you for, for evoking those memories. And you have a beautiful studio, and the music reminded me of what I just heard yesterday about J.K. Rowling when she was writing, I think, the first book of Harry Potter, that she lived also near a place where they were playing, I think, Tchaikovsky, and it was inspirational. So that's also related to, your beautiful country where you live.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely aspect, especially if you're building solutions in virtual reality, where you have to combine the kind of endless chaos of possibility into some order, just like you have the possibilities of music that you have to construct into the tones and melodies of something that is pleasant to the ear. You do the same with all the creative inputs you put into virtual reality, and that certainly has helped, I have to say.
Wonderful. So, Sam, I would like to start with the time before you joined the field of neurotech.
Mhm.
You said that you've already been working on commercializing emerging technologies before. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that experience that you had.
Mhm.
And then we will go into how did all this unraveled into your already new neurotech work and experience?
Okay, I will take this question from a chronological perspective. So I grew up in Slovakia. It's a small country in Eastern Europe. And when I was about 14 years old, we started programming. I was introduced to programming. I was privileged enough to have my parents and get me onto a Java course where I learned the basics. And ever since then, I was absolutely overwhelmed by the possibilities of the personal computer, the applications that we could build that are essentially limitless and allow us to do things that we could never do before, intellectually, physically, in all kinds of ways. I think it's from that early idea that I get fascinated with brain-computer interfaces. I regarded mobile phones and laptops and personal computers as brain-computer interfaces from a young age. But I was always wondering, how can we kind of push this limit further and still use pretty much the same data that we use now for controlling these devices, but to capture them earlier on, as you would say, upstream. And that's how these kind of notion of motor neuroprosthetics came to be and came to be an interest of mine. I moved to America for my last 2 years of high school. This was first in Texas and then later in Florida, which I believe where you're based. And I eventually graduated from the schools. I did more computer science along the way, built games and other of these kinds of applications that sit between a computer and a person. And then I read this amazing paper by Susumu Tonegawa. This is how really I think it started for me with brain-computer interfaces, who has discovered that if you can identify an engram, a memory engram in the brain that's associated with a particular experience of a mouse when it's experiencing pain, that you can then optogenetically also stimulate that same engram later on to invoke the same pain memory experience, even though the mouse was not really in the same environment or was not exposed to pain. And the mouse would freeze, the same way as it would before. That to me sparked this idea of, wow, we have an ability to record memories into engrams and also to then activate them later on to invoke some even behavioral changes. And as I looked more into it, I became more involved with the organization called Carbon Copies in my free time. And kind of this idea of neurotechnology and brain-computer interfaces has been growing in my head, and I've started to sculpt some ideas. Now, moving forward to what made the kind of transition into the role, I was always working on kind of areas that are tangentially related to the brain-computer interfaces to medical devices. So I worked in small startups to also larger enterprises, but some examples would include, taking an idea of a lab automation platform that allows you to orchestrate different instruments in the lab in a way that you maximize, efficiency of the use of these equipments. To take that idea and to bring it into markets in a company called Cluster Market, where I was heading their product team, their software product team. I know in between high school and this time, I would have graduated from college, did the computer science degree, University of Greenwich here in London. And then some other ideas I was exploring as well were things like data management, optimal data management, and kind of quality trace for clinical trials. And it was always like, how can I apply this to brain-computer interfaces? And I think in parallel to all of what I was reading slowly more and more about neurotechnology and brain-computer interfaces, I became more and more interested in that sector. And I just started angel investing. I thought I have a good sense of what products can make it on the market. I know what factors to look out for. I know how to evaluate these early stage companies so that they make commercial sense. And I know the technology underneath various brain computer interfaces, invasive, non-invasive to some extent. Right. So I started investing and I invested in 4 companies. Eventually, eventually kind of solidifying myself even more and more strongly in the space of brain computer interfaces. And that's how I started then to completely go full throttle with uCat. I have been pitched an idea. There's actually 2 kind of, I think, important events, historical events here. So one, I was pitched an idea for a endovascular brain-computer interface to help with stroke rehabilitation. Company no longer exists, but when I was evaluating it, I had created a kind of, it finally made me create the cost effectiveness model, at least a light cost effectiveness model. How cost effective would a brain computer interface that's implanted in the motor cortex be in comparison to other available methods for conditions like severe paralysis? And I came to this conclusion that if there are technologies that allow us to maybe move a cursor around the screen using our decoded motor intent, or technologies that allow us to spell letter by letter, kind of in the usual way when you see a kind of a kernel going through a keyboard and there's, it stops at A, and then you trigger the selection of a letter A, and, it goes on until the letter N, and then you stop again to spell N. That these kinds of modalities are probably not going to give any more effectiveness to people who can already use eye tracker. Because if they use an eye tracker, they can do the same two motions, but non-invasively. And if they don't use eye tracker, they still would be relying on using their eyes to select these letters. So this is a kind of an important trade-off that I was thinking about that got me to an idea of expressivity. So if you can somehow get the information transfer rate up from within the motor cortex about the decoded motor commands from, say, one-dimensional click or two-dimensional cursor control to, imagined arm movement, imagined hand movement, to imagined, or rather attempted leg movement, walking around, all the way up to imagined speech, then all of a sudden you have mapped out a lot of the motor faculties that are available to able-bodied people, and it would be a mistake to use that signal to only control the cursor on the screen. It's a mistake to dumb that signal down to, say, low-dimensional uses of that signal, of that insight. And that's where virtual reality came in, right? If you can extract this motor intent at that level of resolution and at that dimensionality, at some threshold performance, then you can interpolate that data onto a virtual avatar and allow people who are locked in or severely paralyzed to move their avatar again, stand up, walk around, wave, and talk through their avatar. And I promised there was another historical event. The other historical event, I'm not quite sure how this podcast is associated with GTech, but GTech organized a spring school in 2021, was it, or 2022? Can't quite remember, 2021 maybe, where Dr. David Moses from the Cheng Lab has, I think, been awarded the second place at the BCI award, and he was presenting his work there. And then, following the spring school, there was discussion and competition for the BCI award. And his work was the first work, to my knowledge, where attempted speech was decoded into text. So all previous uses of these cortical neuroprostheses to decode speech or decode text were done, as I said earlier, to control, imagine your movement of the hand and use the letters on a virtual keyboard one by one, by effectively moving the cursor with your imagined hand movement in two dimensions. But now there was a new possibility where you could decode speech as a person was attempting to speak it, and the area where the signals were recorded were now precentral gyrus, ventral precentral gyrus, speech motor cortex, that are involved in controlling your mouth, your breathing, your tongue to produce words. And those movements were decoded into phoneme probabilities, and phoneme probabilities into words. And all this is a long story to say that all of a sudden we have been able to extract over 20 times the performance of speech decoding than before. So with this new paradigm, where you don't have to spell letter by letter, you're able to outperform the eye tracker. You're able to outperform all existing previous modalities for decoding speech from the brain activity by an order of magnitude or more. And that's what these two kinds of realization, the cost effectiveness model, I suppose, to some extent, and this scientific breakthrough has kind of culminated into creating the concept of uCat, with somebody who has no, research experience in building such systems. And I think simply talking about it to people I knew from my dealings in BCI has attracted them to join the project. And one by one, we got to a point now where we have a prototype, which I can talk about a little bit more later, and are hoping to get our system tested in a clinical trial setting with real participants.
Thank you so much. How long did this journey take you from your initial interest about BCI technologies to already this first prototype that you built?
The journey of uCat is less than 2 years old from inception. So let's say that the inception is around 2021, I would believe, a spring school from GTech conference. And then, or around that time, whenever the paper was first announced, before it was published. So there's somehow we get a window into the future on some of conferences where researchers present their work before it is published. So it's about 2 years. However, there were times that I was involved with BCIs and trying to launch some previous products in the past. So I've been looking into this area since 2016, seriously, but the last 2 years are the story of uCat.
Yeah, so maybe then you can tell our listeners about this first product that you created, that first prototype. And maybe you can also give like a glimpse into how this product could look like in a reality. Let's say if we are in a VR and the person is paralyzed, really, how would it feel? How it all would work? Just to create like a visual, although we're only talking.
Absolutely. To give an illustration of our prototype as it is right now, we were really deeply inspired by the work that the Cheng Lab has done. So the Cheng Lab has created the first speech prosthesis that I mentioned, speech neuroprosthesis that utilizes attempted speech to decode, words into text. Brain activity into text. We have seen that other labs have come to replicate similar studies or have done their own studies that are trying to, replicate the approach, but using a more invasive electrodes, particularly the Utah array. This is the BrainGate group at the University of Stanford, NPSL group, that was working on this with the intracortical arrays. And one of the things that was apparent was that during these studies, the participants had to go through very long and tedious training sessions to train the machine learning to recognize their speech. So in the case of NPSL group at Stanford, was over almost 11,000 sentences that the participant had to repeat in order for the decoder to be trained. And they had to, every session say some new words to retrain the decoder so that the performance is maintained. That's a very tedious process. There was 26 days of constant repetition of words, 26 different sessions, I believe, that the participant went through. And that's not something that can allow us to bring speech neuroprosthesis for paralyzed people to the market, to the clinic. These kinds of long cycles of training time. Additionally, at each of these 26 sessions, they were supervised by a team of PhDs to help troubleshoot any issues. If you're using the software, it should be seamless, including, it should be also stable and seamless to be used by the user. So our task was to try to help out with the future of these studies, especially when you have to scale these studies for pivotal trials. When you want to bring this device to market as a therapy for paralyzed patients, you want to scale these trials to 10, 15, 20, 30 sites and hundreds of participants. You want to make this process of training the decoder as seamless as possible, as engaging as possible. It should be fun. It should be something that people want to do and they see value in. So what we decided to do is build a virtual reality prototype where these participants that are severely paralyzed can follow the same kinds of paradigms as in these existing studies, which is here is a word appearing on the screen, and you should repeat it when the counter is going to expire. And so we can record what the brain activity associated with that word is. And we have done it with an AI character we call uCat. That's a little robot cat that takes them through everything that's going to happen to them throughout this training period, what these different exercises are about, and it gives them an ability to use those words that were decoded successfully to also navigate the environment. So we have implemented now things like when you say, hey, uCat, a menu is spawned, and the participants can choose which tasks they want to practice, whether it's repeating words, sentences, or if it's testing the decoder, such as answering questions that we have daily questions for them to kind of check in how they're feeling. This is the earliest of our prototype, and because it's automated supervision or automated instruction of participant tasks, it allows people to test this speech prosthesis from the comfort of their home, should it be wireless and portable, and to do it at large scales, right? Everybody gets the same introduction, everybody gets the same training procedure, and it feels really engaging. There is an actual character in 3 dimensions talking to you and listening to what you have to say back to it. How this manifests, to answer your second part of the question, how this manifests into the real world is that while I think these training times can be minimized by optimizing the strategies of how language speech is decoded, to not require over 10,000 repetitions of sentences to train a decoder, I think there will still be a continuous need to have patients kind of validate how they are using the speech prosthesis and what is working well for them. So what our uCat prototype or uCat experience is about is to give them a sandbox, a set of tools for patients who are severely paralyzed to continuously test how their speech is being decoded, how their movement is being decoded, whether it seems realistic, and to also improve. So all of these, when we come to tasks that test the performance of the decoder, there is a scoreboard so they can try to see if they can improve their scores over time. And I believe this is the necessary piece of tooling that will allow people who are severely paralyzed to use a brain-computer interface to get confident about their newly reclaimed abilities of speaking and moving again before they serve the wider metaverse, before they go and experience other virtual content, such as going to social virtual reality applications and meeting their loved ones in those virtual reality applications, or collaborating with people again in VR, or just traveling to different places. Before they get exposed to the real virtual world, if I can call it that, we would like to equip them with as much confidence in their own ability to use their body, their virtual body, as possible.
So it's like a personal guide for paralyzed people into the VR experience. Can we say that?
Yes, I think that's accurate. Yes.
Mhm. Very interesting. Now, you mentioned that this might be like somebody, yes, who accompanies them, and it's a real character, and it's a cat. Why did you choose a cat?
I don't know. People like cats. They can eventually choose whatever they want to else interact with. But my creative director, co-founder at uCat, has decided it will be a cat, and I stand behind the decision. I like cats. I'm a cat person. And we give the cat obviously human-like features, including robot-like features. So she's very cute. It's hard to describe in words how something visually looks, but she is designed to be the kind of guide that would evoke comfort and focus over time. So we opted in to have something that people would like, as opposed to something that is just too programmatic, too still. At the end of the day, we want to give people an ability to have fun again, to, have wonderful experiences that evoke multiple kinds of emotions and not just a very strict kind of regimented training procedure.
Yes, I agree. What color is the cat?
It's purple and silver. But purple is the main color. It's very cute when you have, you get cancers correctly. She emits different color. She has a little hologram laser that she shoots sometimes. Um, yeah, she's really lovely.
Yeah, and I think, there is also, at least what I see, some cultural component if we think about the Cheshire cat, yes, from Alice in Wonderland.
That's it.
So a guide as well, yes, in certain reality, in a new reality for Alice in that place and, for people.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe not as much of a trickster, but that's a very good analogy. Yes, we just chose a guide that I think people would like to have by their side as they try to learn the new skills.
Yes, yes, and of course, comfort animal, no, without any doubts. That's a great choice. I was just very curious about all the details. That's why it immediately evokes interest. You see, yeah. Okay, so what do you think would become possible with this uCat guide into the virtual reality for people who have paralysis that is not available at the moment?
Well, at the moment, there is really nothing that's available. So there is a race to the market by very large, multi-hundred million brain-computer interface startups that are all trying to compete who gets out their implant for treating paralysis or at least increasing independence after severe paralysis first. And the companies there at the forefront are BlackRock, Neurotech, Neuralink, Synchron, and Paradromics. And they all have slightly different technologies, or you could say radically different technologies, depending how you look at it. But what I think they all equally lack, by no fault of their own, is a very strong argument how is this data that they can extract from the brain going to be used that improves the well-being of the target population that they're serving, the user base that they're serving. And when I say no fault of their own, it's because obviously these startups, they are, every single one of them are spin-out university startups who have worked on either neural engineering or biomedical engineering, and not on user experience. This use of the data that they extract has never been core competency in these startups, and I really see it as a big mistake. So we're lacking to see what is it possible to do with the data that's being decoded. And at the moment, if you look at the applications, they all involve, they kind of fall into a couple of categories. They fall into the categories of robotics. So you can have exoskeletons for some people with some level of paralysis. You can have, say, prosthetics or robotics that are externally attached to the wheelchair or to another, kind of stationary object that's in the room. Both of these use cases for robotics are extremely expensive. So indications for a company that's building prosthetic arms is, for example, Phantom X. They build a prosthetic arm, and it's rumored that it costs upwards of $100,000. Exoskeletons are $250,000 or more. These are not affordable, and they won't be in the time that these therapies come out. Virtual reality is extremely inexpensive. It's a headset. As long as you can map the signals that are decoded about the motor intents in the brain onto the virtual avatar, you can move the avatar. In that way, uCat, I promised earlier that there is a second part of the solution we're building. One is this guided experience. The second is a mapper, or rather an input system that takes the brain-computer interface decoded movement data and interpolates that onto the virtual avatar at a level of the operating system in virtual reality. So that's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but what it means is that we take the movement of, say, the hand, how it's moving up and down as it's being decoded by the decoder, the brain-computer interface, and we put that hand onto the virtual avatar that's embodied by the person. This is a software integration and allows them to then use the hand just as if they were not paralyzed. So I use virtual reality with my hand with the use of cameras that can track it in three-dimensional space to select things on the menu. and they will be able to do the same. So in that way, we're creating an indistinguishable experience for people who have severe paralysis in the metaverse and of people that are meeting them, right? So they also appear to be indistinguishable from any other users who are able-bodied. Um, and then there's one more application, or maybe there's one optional one that I should also mention. So one of the BCI pioneers I spoke with, Ian Burkhardt, has been the first person who has had, using this Utah array, intends his motor commands about how he's going to move his hand, particularly, were decoded, and then it stimulated EMG electrodes on his forearm to activate his own muscles to move his hand. And this is known as a neural bypass. You may have seen a Swiss participant recently been able to stand up and walk again after a spinal cord injury. And this is a similar principle, but that technology is equally not available outside of the lab, let alone having some rumored price tag. It's not available yet. And then, so this was the optional one. The last remaining use case that it seems that every single of these companies I mentioned at the forefront of cortical neuroprosthetics is going after is cursor control. So two-dimensional cursor control of a computer or smartphone that allows the participants to use their decoded motor intents to click away and to spell individual words on the screen, from a keyboard. But as I said earlier, we already have an ability to decode much richer data from what the individuals are attempting to do. And we should not be dumbing them down to a mere two-dimensional cursor control. We should be actually representing them as we are decoding them and interpolating them on a virtual avatar. That's a one-to-one mapping.
Yes, thank you, Sam. What would become possible for paralyzed people in virtual reality? As we are just starting to learn virtual reality and the metaverse, something that is developing, how this can be useful to people.
I think I still focus quite a lot so far about talking about the technology and not about the outcomes. I think I should be a bit more clear here. So the reason why virtual reality is the solution that we go with, or let's say the utility, the type of use of the data that's decoded, is because it's the most expressive. And that's really the key important metric here. So when you're severely paralyzed, there are about 21 million people severely paralyzed in the world right now. That means they can't even operate a wheelchair by themselves. They need an electronic wheelchair with postural support, and they have difficulty speaking. You want to give back as much of the ability that was there before it was nullified by paralysis. That's why virtual reality is the medium that we chose for using a brain-computer interface data. Because if you can express your thoughts with a large vocabulary, as it's being decoded in near real time, so the current benchmark from the aforementioned Cheng lab is 78 words a minute that's decoded from premotor cortex. If 78 words a minute can be decoded from your attempted speech, then that's really approaching the speed of how you and I communicate right now. We probably say 120 words a minute right now on our podcast. But if you can use that rich, high bandwidth data and put it instead of the microphone input in a virtual reality setting, then you allow people to have normal conversations with others in near real time, expressing their thoughts as they're becoming available. This is much different to using something that has 17 characters a minute as a bandwidth, and those are the spellers I was talking about. So simple use cases of giving people with severe paralysis options to communicate with their loved ones are already remarkable. And in virtual reality, this is more seamless than anything, because it's not a virtual call. It's their presence with embodying an avatar and being there in the room with another person. So it's kind of simulating how a conversation would look. And similarly with the movement, right? If a lot of these studies, including the Cheng Lab study I was just mentioning, and the BrainGate NPSL study I was mentioning before, those are able to decode orofacial or facial expressions just as much as they are decoding speech. So micro expressions when people are talking are decoded, and in two-dimensional cursor control, they're not being used for anything. They're being chucked into the bin. In virtual reality, they give the expression back to the user in the form of moving their face when they speak, or doing micro expressions in the face when they speak. And moving on to other parts of the body. I now, if our listeners would have video, would see me waving my hands around like a crazy person, trying to drive this point home. And it's again something that we can use if that data is becoming available to us with these high density microelectrode arrays. That is being thrown away with the use cases that are currently presented to the public by these leading brain computer interface startups. So having that level of expressivity is really the key use of the data to give patients back the expressivity they have lost so they can participate in activities that involve meeting other people or just returning them to the activities of daily life that can be made digital. And I think the really interesting use cases here are returning to work. So it turns out that there is about $54,000 lost to every person with severe paralysis who's out of work because of the paralysis. Whether it's for hobby purposes or actual vocational kind of income generating purposes, having an avatar that's highly expressive in near real time, allows people to get back to the occupations they had. Design things in real time, in VR, meet other people, consult them, give talks, create music. All these things are possible if we can find a good use, maximally expressive use of the data that's being decoded from the brain.
Yeah, the outcome is really, really very impressive. And just to summarize, what it provides is not only verbal communication, but non-verbal. Yes, facial expression, gestures, yes, which is an essential component of human communication. Then you also want to use all this rich data to provide possibilities for people to actually continue with their activities. Is it for vocational purposes? Is it for hobbies where they can teach, they can design, they can produce content and do many other things? All that might become possible. So, what is needed to really take advantage of all that content that is available in the data and which is not currently being utilized?
I think there are a number of challenges that are technical, societal, cultural, that need to be overcome. The technical ones, I'm not the best authority to describe, but certainly there are difficulties with decoding algorithm that is requiring retraining at every session and requires large data sets in order to provide reliable outputs. There is pretty still a large error rate in these cortical neuroprosthetics for speech. So the state of the art is around 25% word error rate. So every fourth word that is decoded is incorrect. That has been minimized in offline results, but in real time, this was the benchmark, right? So we only saw two real-time demonstrations of speech prostheses that have kind of unlocked the possibilities, the realm of possibilities. But there's a lot more work needed to mature these technologies. So I think as much as I would like uCat to be in the real world by the end of this year, I think best what we can hope for is to help other scientists who want to mature these trials to more participants and to more reliable decodings to do so with more automated participant protocols. Some other challenges are the device itself. So some longevity data has been published both about the BrainGate system and about other modalities like using ECOG arrays, which you would be, or ECOG grids that you would be more familiar with in long-term studies. And they have shown that there is still good signal retention, at least 2 years But I think the real benchmark we should strive for is having great signals for at least, say, 5 to 7 years for this therapy to become clinically viable. But again, these are technical kind of problems that I haven't devoted my career to. What I can speak to that we're seeing a lot now is the kind of cultural challenges in trying to communicate what the state of the art is to the wider public. But it doesn't just mean wider public of people who can shake our hands and say, we support you, but to people who are kind of integral in this process. This is private funders. This is individual patients. We don't want to give false hopes about what the technology can and cannot do, but at the same time, there is a challenge of trying to say what the technology has already done and what the potential for it is. So there is this narrative challenge, I would call it, where people are genuinely unaware about brain-computer interfaces, and I can't blame them because before these cortical neuroprosthetics that are pioneered by BlackRock Neurotech, Paradromics, and Neuralink, there was really no solution to paralysis. There was rehabilitation, occupational therapy, and that was really it. There is no ways of transcending that paralysis that culturally would be accepted before the rise of these invasive brain-computer interfaces. And that certainly is a challenge to tell people, these are now the things that are possible. I was just on a call last week with Tom Oxley from Synchron. He was talking about Synchron will be the first company that brings cortical neuroprosthetics to the market. He was talking about his company's pivotal studies that are being conducted now and how they're focusing on patient engagement and giving people the ability to move again with the use of BCIs. But that because he's the first person to bring this technology to the market, it's also the person with the greatest challenge to convince everybody, mainly the insurers, to cover some of this therapy, right? So there's a lot of, I say, social political tension in bringing these kinds of novel therapies to market that, rightfully means that Neuralink has already spent $300 million of building their device already, and that's before they had first in human study. These are not easy problems, even though they are not technical.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sam. I'm very curious what skills and maybe qualities helped you to successfully develop this uCat project.
I think I was a technologically minded person. There's certainly, when you try to look at places of innovation or, spaces that can be innovated, there is not a lot of data available that can cloud your judgment, right? So if you're susceptible to bias of various kind, you may end up trying to propel an idea which actually is not going to work ever. And your lack of access to information has made it so that you have wasted your time away. So, as a form of recommendation, we in uCat have over 150 articles that we have collected in our data room. And this whole concept of data room in commercial projects is incredibly important that I would emphasize here more than anything. If you are a technically minded person and have an analytical mind, you can be at the forefront of deep tech innovation, even though you don't work directly in the space. Yeah, as long as you can read and consult individuals who are experts on the things that you are not. I mean, it's quite foolish to assume that you could be a expert on these topics in bringing something like uCat to market, virtual reality and invasive brain-computer interfaces, where even just brain-computer interfaces require knowledge across many, many, many disciplines integrated into, and this is disciplines of, material science, electrical mechanical engineering, data science, but also on the side of regulatory and financial analysis and clinical perspectives. These are all many, many topics that you're never going to be expert on, which is where an informed opinion about all these factors that determine your success is incredibly important. And in the investment world or startup world, we call that a data room. So in the data room, you should collect all of your information about your projects that's relevant to the project, so you can kind of update your biases or destroy your biases and update your strategies and roadmaps. So I think, yes, having a kind of technological mindset with an analytical eye has certainly helped me to be able to know what solutions will work and will not work. That being said, we are not successful. We are a small project. We have a few people that are working full time on our project, but mostly we are trying to get research consortia established now to validate our technology in the lab. We are very early on, technology readiness level 3, maybe going into 4 soon, but or sorry, 2, and maybe going into 3. So it's really, really soon for us to say any learnings that people should apply. I would caveat with that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sam. One thing that you didn't mention, but I noticed through what you talked about, is your ability to really critically evaluate the problem and the situation. For example, you noted that, yes, now there are several companies that are competing for the implantation device, yes, for further BCIs. You noticed that trend and you identified very beautifully the niche that is really missing customer care, how real patients would feel, yes, with these devices, how to really provide them with the best experience possible in this new area of using BCI technologies. And with the same eye, you described how you looked through the articles, through the existing papers. Yes, what is available, the multidimensional use of the data versus really limited that is being used right now. So, can you tell maybe a little bit more how your mind works that allows for this critical evaluation of the information that you are dealing with?
I think I look at goals a lot. I look at milestones and goals a lot, and they are usually grounded in, as you said, the experiences of the users. So my whole career has been spent as a product manager. I graduated with a computer science degree, and I built a few solutions here and there. But I soon realized that my unique value add was in the very early stages of the product development lifecycle, where idea becomes a prototype and prototype gets investment, and then it wasn't too interesting for me, and I would supervise the delivery of the various critical milestones until the successful release of the product to the market. That's pretty much what I did for the last 8 years. Different lengths of these cycles, but different products. And the formula was always the same. Start with identifying what does the user need? What does the user truly need? And then work backwards to the technology. So start with having a look at what is it that severely, in this case, paralyzed patients, people with severe paralysis, are not allowed to do. And see if there is any way that they can retrieve what joys they had in life before the accident. And try to write them down. So I have a list of kind of user outcomes. This is things like I can walk around my room. I can perform activities that I enjoy without supervision for a whole day. And the list goes on. And I have these written as kind of milestones or goals. And then those I have constructed, if you can look at them as which are related to which, which you have to accomplish first, to then accomplish some other ones later, which are possible with the technology now, if you then work back into the technology realm, and which will be later, you start plotting them on a kind of a chronological path. How are you going to achieve those things that are really important for the success of your project or for your product to have a good fit in the market. And before you realize it, you have a roadmap. That piece of document, that single thing of roadmap, turns an idea into a plan. And once you have a plan, you can get people behind the plan to help you build it. And I think that's something that is overlooked. Everybody can talk about a vision, about a dream, about a future place in time when we would like to achieve certain things, but it's really hard to work on the individual detailed steps of how to get there, I found. But what allowed me to convince a lot of people to join the project and hopefully will be behind the success of the project, which I have to stress again, the project is not successful. We are raising our first round in late October, is the establishment of very clear objectives that kind of double down on the need of the patient identified as a kind of a missing piece of the puzzle. And I think in addition to that, the data, well, it's kind of the same really in concept, right? If you have the good data room, which then supports all of your, this is realistic to achieve by this time, like we can get individuals to have an uninterrupted conversation in near real time as a requirement, then you have to work backwards towards seeing all the research and technology that allows you to do it. And if it's mature enough that you can try to integrate it or its simulation into the product that you're building, then you push it to the sooner in time kind of ranking, and you work on it. And data room and a roadmap, I think, are really important for you to even start working on anything that you want to have a commercial success out of. But again, these are kind of general principles. You don't always need to follow them, right? There are some use cases where you already know that something's going to work. Maybe you can look at other companies that have been doing it successfully, and then you can just do it better. You can just make technology faster. You can optimize a simple benchmark. Then your success is also assured. So take these with a grain of salt.
Again, optimization. So it's wired already, I think, in your brain, really optimizing things. So now user experiences, you said you are starting with that. What can be done for them that is not available at the moment? Where do you find this information? Are you communicating with the families, with people, or evaluating in general what's available in the world for these people and then making a judgment of what is missing? So where does this information come from?
Yes, various different sources. This isn't, one size fit all. So for whatever our listeners will want to build, they need to go to the right sources. But usually the right source is the intended user you have in mind. You have started to work with people with anarthria first. It's a condition which we could loosely characterize as a speech paralysis. People with speech paralysis purely. And there can be many conditions that lead to speech paralysis that are not related to whole body severe paralysis. But as the time went on, we realized that there's actually a very large overlap. Locked-in patients, for instance, with in a locked-in state, suffering from, say, ALS, are going to be representing both speech paralysis and motor paralysis. And that updated who our user base is going to be. Then we realized that brainstem stroke also leaves considerable amounts. It's about 25% of people who are in locked-in state are because of a brainstem stroke. And that also often leaves them with paralysis of upper and lower extremities. So we found out that the users are going to be different. As I said, always evolves. And first people we spoke with were the previous BCI users. So Ian Burkhardt, I mentioned already from the BCI Pioneers Foundation, were the first. And then we reached out to the ALS Foundation, the Scott Morgan Foundation in the UK, who also gave us some really clever ideas that have all made it into the prototype. We were talking with Ian about the ability to practice conversations. This is why we integrated a language model with the uCat characters so they can practice conversation with an AI before they are let into the real world. Similarly, we were talking about the kinds of environments people would like to be in, because originally we wanted to do it underwater, but we didn't realize that underwater virtual environment can evoke quite big phobias for people who can't really control their limbs properly and have, signify that they're going to drown. So we optimized the way again, and I think those pieces of information are most valuable. Second, I'd say for us was experts, industry experts. As I said, there's not a lot of published information about things that particularly interested us, like what applications are individual startups in this cortical neuroprosthetic space going to come out with once approved by FDA. So we had to speak with people who work for those companies or used to work, and then we found out, and now it's a matter of public record because they have all published them on the website. So, luckily it all came true. I think those sources of information were really important, and it depends on the niche we work. Our whole startup success is predicated on how portable, but retaining still the high performance of the solution of, say, each neuroprosthesis can be, or movement prosthesis can be in the future. And so we are reading, or I'm reading the latest papers the day that they come out on things like, John Simmeral's paper on wireless use of Utah arrays instead of using these big pedestals, transcutaneous pedestals that need to be screwed in, and they for many ECOG and IBCI or intracortical BCI Utah array applications, they sprout infections in those areas and they cause serious adverse effects because of it. So can you make more and more smaller these pedestals, or maybe even implanted inside of the body where you don't have this risk of infection so much? All these are important factors for us, and it was important that we stay on top of the scientific literature in this particular case.
Yeah, I muted. It reminded me, I just wanted to look at that podcast, our latest podcast, the study that you also mentioned, a connection between the brain and spinal cord that allowed a paralyzed person to move, a study from Switzerland. And they are using these wireless implants that they develop actually for motor cortex. I think it's used bilaterally. So it's one of applications that are already being used, but I don't see people talking about this type of implantable devices much. What do you think about this type of wireless implants? And I think they are actually added not even directly on the brain. So they demonstrated to be safe, at least, to a certain extent.
From what I'm hearing and what I'm reading, the community does not seem to enjoy penetrative cortical implants like the Utah arrays. Because of various reasons, but it seems that the performance of those arrays, at least for the applications we've seen so far, can be achieved with ECOG arrays, ECOG grids that are still sitting under the dura, but on top of the brain. And those, I think, a company like Precision Neuroscience are pioneering a way of implanting these that do not have to expose so much of the brain area in the procedure, which I think has a really good trade-off in terms of signal-to-noise ratio and the relative, safety of the procedure. There are kind of the neurointerventionalist approach, which is pioneered by Synchron using endovascular implants, is also quite good, but they only have 10 people that they have studied with it, and I'm not quite sure that the signal-to-noise ratio is high enough. In fact, this use case that they're coming out with in hopefully later this year or next year in their pivotal trials, has to do with a one-dimensional signal decoding as a sort of a neural trigger, where it doesn't even allow for people to imagine hand movement and then track a cursor on a screen. It's even more simple than that. And if there is a fundamental limit because of the technology, then those implants are simply not going to work for restoring kind of indistinguishable level of mobility and speech to people with severe paralysis. Not going to work to the end that we're fighting for at uCat.
Yes, so the ones that I talked about, we imagine, WI imagine devices, and it's a recording of ECOG data. Like you mentioned, one of the possibilities without penetrating electrodes, and it's one of our podcasts with Henry Lorak, Dr. Henry Lorak from Switzerland. So
I'll be very excited to listen to it. This is interesting technology, not something I'm familiar with right now. I cannot comment.
Yes, yes, but thank you for mentioning all those different approaches and emerging and already well-established technologies. So, like you said, there are opportunities to record the data, yes, but I think the work that you do is really, really important to make the human experience using those BCIs really enjoyable and comfortable for people. So, which is very important. And you also emphasized twice that you don't have a successful project yet. So, what do you mean by success? Yeah.
Well, as you know, I'm goal-oriented by this point, and I'm not going to start working on this project until uCat is allowing people who have the interest to express themselves in the metaverse to have the ability to do so. And these are people with severe paralysis, people with less severe paralysis, whoever intends to better their well-being by retrieving this level of expressivity they have lost and is eligible for computer interface therapy, mainly the invasive one, is going to be our user. And our product should help every single person that has a need to has this implant and has a need to express themselves again to do so one step at a time. Yeah, so for us, this is a kind of very long-term goal. We are kind of working here because we have a very small friends and family investment. We're able to get a small team going, but more tangible ways for us to grow are to successfully combine our user experience solution with a research partner in a kind of grant setting to validate the technology in the lab. Even this with a single patient would allow us to demonstrate that this is the right way to use brain-computer interfaces, and it has a huge potential.
Absolutely. And what companies do you want to partner with to test your program?
We have the academic labs who just want to see if they can get better performance of their speech and motor BCIs are great partner candidates for us. So there are a few that we are already working with. However, we haven't identified a good grant that we can all collaborate on. So if people are interested in automated kind of participant protocols and using virtual reality primarily for speech prostheses, but also for movement prostheses, then this is exactly what we build. So we're focused on building the XR element, the application. It's almost like if somebody wanted to test out how good their decoder is, they would have to partner with somebody who builds a prosthetic arm to allow the patient to interact with objects using the decoder. And we instead can do that in VR and can dedicate the whole team to do those experiments. So we are kind of early here in the R&D cycle. And if there are labs that want to do a single participant experiment that is just very engaging for the participant, or multiple patient participant experiments, then both are very welcome to contact us, and we can always find a way to partner.
What is the most challenging part of this project you are finding so far?
I think the narrative challenge I talked about earlier is quite a big one. When I'm having conversations with maybe potential investors or people just in general, it takes a lot of time to just explain what the brain-computer interfaces do before we say how we add our value into the bigger picture. And that's really not trivial. It means that in order for people to like our projects and support our project in any ways imaginable, they have to go through a lot of information, then make up their mind whether they're going to support us or not. And that information, is a huge barrier. So, I mean, but it's also justified because it's a new technology that hasn't been yet seen in the market that we're trying to optimize. So I think that has been quite a big challenge. I think also, what generally these therapies and solutions are developed within labs in academic circles, not having been part of one, also certainly is an influence for us. So I can imagine that if we were starting out of Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab that built the most advanced motor neuroprostheses, and is part of the BrainGate group that is, by far the most advanced group, academic group that's investigating motor neuroprostheses, then our chances of success would be, significantly higher. So, there is a lot of challenges to do with developing deep technologies, and I think there are no ones that are very specific to us or to neurotech. There are just the kind of challenges in building emerging technologies to bringing them to market that we have to overcome.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about the approaches you use to overcome these challenges. I understand it's not done one-time solution, but what in general you are doing to solve them. Yeah.
The way we try to overcome these challenges, mainly in the narrative space, is to talk to everybody that we encounter who are futurists, who like the idea of advanced technologies and miniaturization of computers and intimate human-computer interaction, and to explain to them what potential brain-computer interfaces have to offer. I think when they hear about it abstractly, it's deterring a lot of people who are still possibly very good collaborators and supporters of, cortical neuroprosthesis or just brain-computer interfaces in general. But if specific examples of how they can get involved or how we are solving a problem that is truly going to matter to the end users, I think people get behind the idea more and more. So I started this project with an idea, and then I have pointed to several studies that have come out late last year and this year about how we can now gather a lot more higher dimensional data from movement, as well as this attempted speech paradigm. And that has just motivated a lot of people to join me because they were not aware of these studies, right? And as soon as I could provide specific examples beyond just speculation about, we can merge minds and we can upload minds and can you join us and help us? Then people would be a lot more receptive, and they saw where they could help. And I think it's a good general principle to try to see what kind of things people like to work on if they're uninterrupted, unbothered, and then figure out whether the stuff that you offer in your startup and in your project can satisfy that need, that desire of theirs, that interest of theirs, and then have them join your team.
Yes, thank you, Sam. And my another question is: you mentioned that you worked previously on some other projects in neurotech, and some other project in the industry, and starting some products. You probably also saw other people starting and succeeding or not succeeding. So, what do you think make eventually a successful product in the industry?
I think having a solid idea of your product market fit is really important. Where does your product solve a particular need and for whom? In the realm of deep tech, which I have worked on in the last, say, 4 years maybe, that means essentially that you're working on frontier engineering or scientific challenges that don't have a really direct market need right now, and they have a long R&D cycle. So you have to spend a lot of time in research and development before your product becomes useful to other people. I think especially in those circles, it's a good thing when the founders or project creators have academic background, or at least have a background that shows an obsession with the topic that they're investigating or going out with. I really don't like this kind of like dichotomy of academic versus non-academic. I think there's a lot of research you can do as a researcher in the industry or as a person in the industry that can be applied directly to deep tech problems. And I think other people realize that too. So not necessarily a pure academic profile is something that's going to indicate your success, but you should demonstrate that you have obsession with the problem you're trying to solve, because that makes you uniquely able to solve it, right? Your GitHub projects of trying to improve the decoder are just as good enough as working in a smaller lab and doing the same thing with other people. So just persevere about working on ideas that you think have a potential for success. Start with individuals who you are trying to help out or you're trying to serve rather than starting with the technology. I'll give you a clear example. Many people have come to me and said, oh, we're going to pitch me an idea for a non-invasive BCI where they're going to use we're going to use SSVP here and we're going to use P300 there. And all of a sudden we're going to have a game that's controlled by the brain and you can select things. And like I was talking about earlier, this does not outperform an eye tracker. An eye tracker is significantly less expensive and is more available, and it's integrated in some PCs and it's integrated in VR headsets. So how the hell are you going to satisfy that? How are you going to beat that market with your technology if it's delivering the same outcome to the user? And that's usually where it starts. So starting with the technology is not a good idea, even if the technology is cool.
Thank you so much. Can you maybe provide some information on where our listeners can find information about your company, how they can connect with you if they have questions or maybe want to establish collaborations?
You can always find me most easily on sam at ucat.app. So that's sam at ucat.app. That's my email. And I will talk to anybody about anything that's related to anything. So I'm just really interested in having conversations about our project, about your projects. If I can help, let me know. And that's my email. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. I've got all kinds of other social profiles.
Yes, we will add all that information into our podcast notes. And maybe as we're nearing the end of our podcast, what would be your recommendations if you can provide some bullet points for those people who want to start their entrepreneurial journey and develop their own product?
I will summarize everything because I think there were some of these points lingering throughout our conversation. And to summarize them, I would start with finding out who is it that you would like to improve the life of, right? If you're working on a particular applied science problem, you already know who you are trying to better or who you are trying to serve or what is the problem that you're optimizing. So start with that and work backwards to the technology. Work backwards to the technology in a way that you define very clearly in a low level of detail, some low level of detail, whatever we call it, what these needs from the individual users are that your software or hardware is going to use later, and then break down all the important parts of that solution in perhaps a chronological order if you can. Try to illustrate the feasibility of all of your ideas by linking these individual kind of milestones of your larger projects to some research or some other facts that prove that this is possible and that it's commercially viable. And try to create a good market analysis. Try to understand that there are a significant amount of people that need the product. What do they do right now to serves their need, and how much is it costing them? And use that in your calculation. It's not rocket science. It's really quite simple, but it's kind of uncomfortable, right? You have to do a lot of research that you don't see a lot of information for. It's kind of dirty information. You have to talk to people. You have to understand other people's perspectives. Maybe it's outside of your comfort zone, but it's still absolutely necessary to bring our products to the market.
Thank you very much, Sam. One question just came to my mind that I'm very curious about when I talk to people who chose develop their own products. What drives you to develop your own product instead of working in a company that creates software and building the things for somebody else?
I don't see any reason why this could not be an idea that's explored by other companies. It just happens that an idea that we're working on now with uCat is not really done by any other company. So I could not work at a different place to solve the problem I have set out to do. Therefore, I had to create my own company to try to solve it. It's really as simple as that. There's no personal advantage to starting your own company that I could identify. There are lovely companies out there in the world. Um, but for me, it's also quite enjoyable to work with so many different people on these problems. And I think I would not have that level of freedom if I was working at a different place. So I'm grateful that I'm so privileged to be able to create my own company and to explore my ideas and the research of our co-founders to this particular practical need, as opposed to following somebody else's footsteps. So if you really have an obsessive idea that you think is great, and you came up with it, pursue it. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. You're the author of your idea, whether you put it in a book, whether you create your own paper, write your own paper, and do your own study, or design your own gadgets, you're still the author as much as if you create your own company or if you work for somebody else while you come up with this product. Just continue being persistent in crafting it more and more specifically and solving problems as they come. There's always going to be problems to solve.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I want you to imagine 10 years from now. Yes, we are meeting on another podcast in 2033, and you are telling me and our listeners about uCat. So, what will it be?
Well, our plan is to take it kind of step by step. So we've created this safe environment for patients to practice using their neuroprosthesis in virtual reality, starting with speech. And the next problem that we work on is movement. So we already have simulations of the data, just like we have for speech, for movement, and that we want to interpolate onto the movement of the virtual avatars. Now, your image is not going to be very pleasing to you, and it's not going to be very personal. It's just going to be an avatar that moves according to how we decode your motor intents. Our next step is to customize your appearance and customize the sound of your voice so that you can really express yourself through the avatar in the experiences and situations that you encounter inside of the VR. That brings us to, I would say, pretty much a complete product that you can then embody an avatar and go into the metaverse and collaborate with people digitally and see different places without any potential harm and without appearing to be any different from anybody else you encounter, even though you're severely paralyzed. That is a complete solution, I think. And the only next step is to get that solution, that product, once demonstrated, to the hands of everybody who needs it. That, I hope, in 10 years will happen with a considerable sample of people who actually need the technology. And that next time we speak on our podcast, it could be that we're joined with some of these users and we are all going to have a conversation about things that they can now do, thanks to uCat.
Thank you. I think that's a great plan, and I'm ready to have this podcast with you in several years and with the users. I think that would be amazing. So, thank you very much, Sam, for this very insightful conversation. I'm sure our listeners also very much appreciate it. I wish you all possible success to your company, to you, to uCat, and many users who will benefit from it. Is there anything you would like to mention before we end?
Thank you very much, Milena. This has been a wonderful conversation. Certainly a lot of things to reflect on after this as well. I'd like to encourage people to explore their ideas a bit more. I think there is a lot of kind of discrimination of early ideas, without real merit. Even if you have an early idea, you come to a person who might be more experienced to you, your mentor, and there's a tendency to incredibly soon dismiss the idea. But I urge you to persist with it and to explore it a bit further. Come up with a proposal. You can find many templates and instructions on how to do a valid kind of market proposal or a business plan for your idea. And only then if it fails. If it turns out that it's going to ruin you and it's not a good thing to spend time on, then make sure that you move on to something else and integrate your learnings. So it's a kind of a hope that people will not just let their ideas live in their heads or get dismissed easily, but to vocalize them, put them on a piece of paper. Even if they're bad, if they're on a piece of paper, they can be iterated on, right? You can always create the next plan out of them. And for the entrepreneurs, that follow a path that's similar to mine, they, you can make products in real worlds that's successful when you are coming from backgrounds which are not particularly specialized on technology A or technology B. As long as you have the mindset, you can surround yourself with the right people, then you have the ability to succeed. So don't get your ideas dismissed too soon, and keep persisting on them until you are convincing yourself that they're no longer going to be commercially successful.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for mentioning that. And this is one thing that I noticed, that we are very eager to dismiss our own ideas and follow somebody else's ideas. I think it's a big bias, yes, towards ourselves.
Yeah.
For some reason, we decided it's not significant. So I really, really appreciate you mentioning it, and really, we are worth of listening to ourselves. So that's very important. So thank you very much again, and yeah, I will see you in our future podcast episodes where we will discuss your new developments and accomplishments. So thank you.
I can't wait. Thank you very much.
Dear Neurocareers podcast listeners, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the entrepreneurial world of neuroscience and neurotechnologies. I hope you've been inspired by the stories of those who are turning groundbreaking ideas into impactful realities. If you are looking for more guidance on succeeding in Neurocareers, book a free consultation with me, your podcast host, Dr. K, at the Institute of Neuroapproaches. So, what are you waiting for? Let's navigate the path to success in the world of neurocareers and make the impossible possible together.